going to try to be very quick anyway. 12 to 15, so I think so.
Margaret, I've got 10 minutes each. 10 to 15, up to you. If you do 10, that's fine.
Oh, I was told 10, so that's what
That's fine. But 15, I reckon, is the absolute maximum. So 10 will be fine. There's some leeway, is what I'm saying. So, no. So if you have a minute or two extra, that's quite all right. Okay, so don't rush. Hello everyone, could I ask you please to take your seats for the final session? Great. Well, thank you everyone for staying for this, our final session. We'll try and get through by just on 4:15 because I'm aware that many of you actually have planes to catch and might be looking to depart for the airport. So we'll get through. The session this afternoon, is around online education and culture, new ways of educating, engaging with and exploring content online. We have 3 speakers this afternoon and I'll do the introductions now and then hand over to them. Our first speaker is Delia Browne, National Copyright Director, Standing Counsel on School Education and Early Childhood. Now you can read Delia's biographical notes in the handout, but I asked each of them just for something that they might like to share with you this afternoon. And Delia said that she should be introduced as a copyright warrior in education and loves to create disruptive influences. And I think if you know Delia, you'll agree that that's exactly right. The other secret she let out to me last night was that when she was studying at university in Auckland, she actually ran a law library. She worked in the law library and had charge of night time. So there's an affinity there with a lot of the audience. Our second speaker is Dr. Tim Sherratt, and again, you can read his notes in the handout. Tim tells me he likes to be introduced as a freelance digital historian, a web developer, and cultural data hacker in search of a real job. And that he discovered rather later in life that he's only really happy when he's making things about the past and sharing them with others. And our third speaker is Donna West-Brett. She is the Manager of Rights and Imaging Licensing at the Art Gallery of New South Wales. Now, Donna has a doctorate in art history, specialising in post-war German photography, and she's currently researching Stasi and surveillance photography of the Berlin Wall. She also says she's a lapsed artist, but have been rediscovering old cameras and film, but has yet to master loading her 1932 Leica camera. Please welcome our speakers, and our first speaker is Delia Browne.
Thanks for the introduction. My name's Delia Browne and I'm the National Copyright Director for Schools and TAFEs. I also have another hat that I wear as one of the co-founders and president of a free online educational project called Peer-to-Peer University, P2PU, which is a free online sort of experimental education project that's been going around about 2009. And so some of the things that I bring into the discussion is really about how technology can be very good for disrupting old educational pedagogical practices and for collaboration and sharing. But what I'm going to really talk about today is education no longer means this. It now means this. It's completely different. How many people have kids at school in the audience? Quite a few of you. And it's really, really different now from when we were at school. It makes you feel like you're 108 years old. But this is what it all means now, which I'll go into a little bit more detail. We don't even know what the next 5 years is going to look like because education has transformed and in ways we didn't even expect in the last 3 to 5 years, particularly with the introduction of things like iPads, mobile apps, you name it, in the classroom. We don't know what the next 5 years looks like. Nobody knows. Education is changing. This means we need copyright also to keep up with the pace of change happening in the real world. So what we have today is a statute which confers certain rights to copyright owners, and we have a number of limited exceptions that allow education and others to use certain types of material in limited circumstances for free. And in Australia, unlike anywhere else in the world, we have a statutory licence scheme which allows education institutions to copy and communicate TV or radio or print and images, but you pay a licence fee. It's remuneration. So it's not an exception, it's a statutory licence which is remunerated. The statutory licences were basically drafted for that, the photocopier or the video recorder. They weren't drafted for this. We've made submissions, the schools and the TAFEs, and I believe also the universities, that we actually think the statutory licence are not really well suited to the digital environment. We think they're economically inefficient, we think they're out of step with international norms, and we think they actually also place disproportionate administrative burden on the educational institutions that trying to comply with them through surveys and limitations. So we need to make sure that copyright keeps up. And most importantly, in the same way that music is not the piano, learning is not the device. And this is particularly because things change really fast. And these are some of the things that are currently making an appearance around the world. Flipped classrooms, massively open online courses, MOOCs, mobile apps, tablet computing, augmented reality, game-based learning, the Internet of Things, 3D printing, flexible displays. These are all things currently starting to come into the classrooms and educational institutions around the world. I want to talk about a couple of them. The flipped classroom. It's an interesting way of... So what this basically means is student-based learning or student-directed learning. And it's one of the biggest moves in recent times. See, 92% of the population at a school isn't the teachers, it's the students. And so what we're looking at here is like more student-directed learning, where kids go and actually do their own learning in a collaborative way, with the teacher being more of a guide or a facilitator, rather than someone who's actually just forcing the push-out method of information. And so it's talking about a whole bundle of new concepts in the flipped classroom. It's not separating real life from school life. It basically is creating environments which students actually make stuff together, more project-based learning. Tablet computing. Well, it's more than just iPads, but you can all agree that iPads is when this all really took off. Now, the iPad or the tablets is now ubiquitous in most schools in Australia. They were only released 3 years ago, and we've gone from nothing to absolute ubiquity in schools in less than 3 years. And again, these tablets are not just allowing increased use of content, but actually massive increases in the degrees in which the students are creators, not just users of content as well. So that's another aspect, I suppose, of flipped education, is the tablet computing. Augmented reality, wearable technology, the Internet of Things. It's a whole bunch of new technologies that are entering into the classroom that are not just blurring lines between physical places, but also between real life and school life. And increasingly, students aren't just mashing up works with works, they're matching up works in the actual real world. And we've got to think about what are the copyright implications when we're looking at this brave new world of education. It's not just this. It's not just about more convenient devices, but it's about this, augmented reality, it's about 3D printers, it's about wearable technologies. Anything in wearable technology, anything from a cheap motion picture capture technology to a wearable camera or display screens. 3D printers, we heard someone talk about that this morning. Scanners and printers, these are now so cheap, and you can buy them off the shelf, that allows you, like an Xbox Connect camera, to be used to scan a student's creations and then allowing them to make those works into 3D form. Augmented realities, that's kind of software and hardware that allows students to overlay creative works on top of real-world data. And so, for instance, you've got students here with iPads capturing classroom content and then converting it into an instructional comic book on the fly to share with others. And every one of these technologies I'm brought up on the board here was basically unthinkable 5 years ago. Every one of them is now being used with off-the-shelf components that you can buy. And how is our copyright law going to be able to deal with this? It's not just the technologies, it's the activities, the use, the learning, the sharing, the collaboration, the creation that it allows. 3D printing, again, another aspect of this ever-blurring line between creators and users. Classroom and real life, virtual and real world. And these systems are in schools now. Combined with the 3D printer and scanners I just talked about, what happens when a student uses his or her face, morphs it into the Mona Lisa, drops the result over a Lego head, prints it out onto a PEDS dispenser, uses the school hardware in the course of design and computing classes. So if we sat down to draw up a copyright framework, how could it possibly deal with all of this? And all the different types of activities which are technically copyright activities are involved. It would actually be out of date before we even tried fixing it. Well, that's what the problem with the current framework is. So, these are the things already making an appearance. And there's many new others that are emerging on a sort of monthly basis in the classroom. But you can get the point, things are moving very rapidly. And so what's next? I don't know. What we're going to look at in 5 years' time. So what we've said, and what we've been saying in our submissions to the LRC, that we actually think we need 3 things to sort of cope with the radical changes in this brave new world, but also something that's kind of future-proofed and sustainable. We need to recognise the strong public interest in ensuring that there's limited uses in content which are non-renewable. So some things has not been, public interest hasn't really been mentioned much today, but there is a public interest in making sure that some things are able to be done without having to get a license, or some things can be done without attracting remuneration. We need flexible open-ended rights, whether it's a fair use style defence in the US, or a fair dealing for education like in Canada. I'm pretty agnostic, but we need to have something that doesn't require tweaking every 2 or 3 years because technology changes. And we need to change the statutory licence system. The system was set up to deal with the photocopy and video recorder 30 or 40 years ago. We're not saying that everything should be free, but there is more flexibility if we do things directly on a voluntary basis. And that can be dealing with collecting societies to do blanket licenses, or it might be more other licenses that are coming to play which schools can deal directly with copyright owners. There needs to be more flexibility, not a one-size-fits-all. So here's education. We need a little bit to be slightly free. A lot of it probably will have to be under a license, but we need a framework that actually recognises that the current system doesn't suit new technology. It's out of step with the rest of the world. We need it to be able to do it in a way without convoluted conditions or remuneration every time, but we also need to make sure we're able to negotiate and encourage licensing where appropriate, because we believe that content owners should be paid in a lot of circumstances, and we should open up choice and options to allow us to have a much more flexible arrangement and encourage licensing where appropriate. This is what we have at the moment. I think it's time to move on, even though I like her outfit. This looked fine in the 1970s, probably looks fine today in Williamsburg and Brooklyn, but it doesn't mean it still works today. So what I've included at the end of the present is very quick, just giving you an idea of what we'll be living in and the current system is still based in this world. But what I've also got here is a number of good links there for you on the presentation that actually gives you more of a description of how these new technologies, collaborations are actually working in the classroom. Thanks.